Ron Mark. Mr Chair, it's a pleasure to be able to stand, albeit only for a 5-minute call on defence. It does give New Zealand First a little bit of concern, Mr Chair, when we read the report from the Foreign Affairs Defence Select Committee on defence, not so much because the brief coverage that it does give on various matters, but probably, Mr Chair, because of the matters that aren't contained in this document. And I would point actually to the previous speaker's comments about nuclear-free New Zealand and the Defence Force, and ask him to ponder the Defence Force role in that, particularly in the light of the white paper that the government's announced, because for us, and particularly in light of the announcement from the Minister for the Environment about the establishment of a marine reserve up the Kermadex, because one could ask why there is such an absence of any reference to the plying through our waters of nuclear-powered, nuclear-armed submarines, which some reports might suggest are about 120 from a smattering of countries. Other reports suggest there might be something as high as 300, 350 going through our waters, but no mention whatsoever from some parties about this aspect of the nuclear-free policy with respect to how we would protect our territorial waters or our EEZ on the limited naval resources we have now if we would establish a marine reserve up in the Kermadex, which we would therefore be responsible for policing, monitoring and enforcing, one would expect. But there's no mention of how we intend enforcing, monitoring, policing from illegal fishers or up in that area if we do go to the extent of declaring a marine reserve up at the Kermadex. Putting aside the other issues that pertain to iwi, of course, which are still being pursued. But I've got to point out to a couple of things, Mr Speaker, and these are the things that have vexed New Zealand First. Firstly, we were told, we looked at the defence budget right from the start and we said that there was a $10 billion defence shortfall when we first looked at it. We then get a white paper that comes out that says that the government's going to spend $20 billion over 15 years, but we still struggle to find anything in the appropriations that actually gives some strength to that commitment, or even in the slightest, a vague pretense of putting out a funding plan in tabulated form so people can see exactly where the money's been appropriated over the next 15 years to meet that $20 billion problem. No one's arguing from this side of the House or from this political party, Mr Chair, that the Defence Force faces some huge challenges going forward with what we could call block obsolescence of a range of equipments, be it Army, Navy or Air Force. But when we announced from the government that we're going to spend, or they announced from the government they're going to spend $20 billion over 15 years, we would expect to see a funding plan put in place, but there is nothing. There's another issue that's causing us some concern, and it disappoints me that it wasn't covered off, and I guess I'm going to have to take responsibility. I'm going to have to pay more attention, and I'm going to have to go into the Foreign Affairs Defence Select Committee meetings more often. But one of the things that concerns us is this rising gap between the other ranks and the officer corps. Firstly, if we go back over time, we see that when our Defence Force was 3 times the size that it is, and we look at the staffing levels in the officer corps today, it's astonishing to find that in some areas we've got 3 times more officers than we had then. 3 times. And what is particularly astonishing is to see the pay differential now between the Chief of the Defence Force at $605,000 and that of a soldier, the person with the rifle and the bayonet at the front end who becomes a casualty in Afghanistan, $46,000. Let's get our head around that. We pay the chief. There was a time in the defence, well, these are the papers from your office, Minister. He's saying that's wrong. Minister's saying that's wrong, that's wrong. I'm reading, Mr. for the record, from the Defence Force letter to New Zealand First, signed off by the Defence Force, G.R. Smith, Commodore, Royal New Zealand Navy, dated the 31st of May 2016. So the Minister says I'm wrong. This paper says that what I'm saying is the truth. So somewhere in between, someone doesn't know what they're talking about. But I'll just say, here it reads, in this column, Chief of Defence Force, $605,407.69. A soldier, trooper, sapper, signaller, $46,730.33. Is that fair remuneration? Is that what we expect for someone who's libelled, who puts their life on the line and in the worst instance comes home to a military funeral? Well, we don't think so. We think that the pay differential between frontline infantry soldiers and troops, Mr. Speaker, is totally out of kilter to what it should be and what the officer corps themselves think is appropriate.
Mr. Chairman.
The Honourable Jerry